didn't even see that. It just went portrait mode for you. Uh, Rwandan flag or is that what
Oh,
is that?
Rwandan Imigongo.
Gongo. I don't know what it means, but it sounds provocative.
Yeah, no one knows what it means, but it's
Yeah,
provocative.
it's like a cultural what art piece.
Yeah, isn't it made of
So
cow's dung or something like that?
no, imigongo is a back, basically your back.
Oh, okay.
So you see where like this spiral shape,
Mhm.
so it looks like a back. Yeah, but it
Oh,
was very
okay.
popular back in the days on how they used to build their houses, decorations, and all these type
Oh,
of things. Yeah.
I just thought it looked nice.
Does look nice. All right,
um,
so welcome to episode one of the Rafiki Lab Report. Name might be changed, but yeah, I don't want it to be too formal. I'll just keep it casual. You've got myself, Mohammud Hassan, and we've got Oggy. I'll let him introduce himself, and then we have Renee. Oggy, let's start with you. Tell
hey,
us a
yeah,
little bit about yourself.
yeah. So I'm Oggy Nduka, born in Nigeria, raised in England, and now I have lived in Rwanda for the last 6 years, and it's now my new home. Um, you know, I'm open to exploring other areas of Africa as well, such as Tanzania, especially Zanzibar. But yeah, so my specialty lies in kind of looking at I look at I look at the existing frameworks that we have, and I try and build on them with a specific context. So the main focus of what I look into is really understanding mindsets, behaviors, and how they affect what we're doing, and integrate them into frameworks so that we can, it's something that we can develop. I also have a specialism within the sales and leadership space. So I'm a business coach as well as a sales consultant, and I do personal coaching as well, with a once again with a heavy focus on mindset and behavioral change. Um, yeah, I've been working in Africa. It's now the last 9 years, which shocked me the other day when I was actually looking at it, going, "Oh, I left England 9 years ago." Um, and yeah, my my goal and what I feel my purpose is really helping to drive um, change and prosperity within on the continent, but in a way where it's coming from the people who are affected every single day. So helping with tools and frameworks that can help people not just in terms of their work life but also personal life, and help to have a multiplier effect in that instance. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing, amazing. As a fellow person who also left the West to move to Africa, I I know there's a lot of different factors involved in making the decision. What were some of the top ones, or what was the main tipping point that made you say, "I'm done with this place"?
So
Was
it's
it
my
or
story's
was it
actually quite,
pulling factors? Was it
yeah,
things that
my,
were
my
pulling you in?
story's quite interesting because I was working in the city of London doing recruitment, and I was recruiting for hedge funds and banks. And I'll be honest with you, you know, I felt something was sucking away from my soul, but didn't really know what. So I remember the journey started one day where I had just closed a massive deal, and I turned to my boss and was like, "I need to quit." And he thought I had lost the deal. I was like, "Nah, it's the fact that I just closed such a big deal, and I wasn't feeling it. So my immediate thought was, it's because I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to have my own recruitment firm. So I left the company, started my own recruitment firm. I got fortunate in the fact that the day I quit, I had actually met someone who was also leaving their firm to start their own hedge fund. And when I told them I had left, they were like, "Oh, you can work on 6 roles that I have." So by the time I actually started the firm, my own recruitment firm, I had already uh, closed 6 deals. So because I had a 3-month gardening leave, and I still felt nothing. So in my head, I thought, okay, maybe it's recruitment that's the issue. So I pivoted from recruitment to being a business coach, helping small and medium and enterprises to grow their businesses. Um, and I felt that I had in fact, for a few months, it was, oh, actually, yeah, this is more exciting. This is kind of where I want to be. So I knew where I want to be in terms of my purpose, but there was still something missing. And it was actually when I met up with someone I had known in college, um, and they were working in Ghana selling toilets, that it just clicked. I was just like, that's what's missing. I would go home to Nigeria every year, and whenever I'd go back to Nigeria, I'd just feel just at peace. The moment I landed, I'd feel at peace, and I realized, oh, that's what's missing. I want to come back home. So that's when I moved. I moved back to Nigeria for a little bit, but Nigeria is a crazy place. If you're not used to it, it can be like the wild, wild west. And then I moved to Ghana for a
Very, very
couple of
different
years.
from London, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Um, so yeah, I moved to Ghana, and Ghana was very different because I call it, my Ghanaian friends won't like this, but I call it Nigeria light, because it's definitely not as crazy. But I still felt at home, and I was doing a wash project in northern Ghana. So, and I just once again felt the peace of being back on the continent. And it was interesting because, yeah, the moment I made that decision, it felt like everything just fell into place. And yeah, I've been here for the last 9 years, and for me, it wasn't. I think the pull factor was really the peace of being amongst my fellow Africans. I know that might sound strange, but when you're in the UK, there are different elements at play that maybe are on your mind, but you don't recognize they're on your mind. So, for instance, people talk about race issues a lot when you're in the UK, but the moment I come back here, don't have to think about it at all. And I think that was one of the things that really helped me settle. And then there's also the fact that I'm fairly relaxed. So it meant when you have internet or electricity issues or power issues, those kind of things, it didn't really affect me because I'd just kind of be like, okay, this is what's happened. Let me get a candle and read a book, that kind of thing, rather than being frustrated that I can't charge my phone or anything like that. So I think as long as you've got that kind of awareness of what you're coming back to, I think there are a lot of benefits to coming back that you won't recognize until you're actually here.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think I had a similar feeling where in the beginning when I officially made the move, I'm still early in my journey compared to you. I think 3 years in, almost three. In the
Okay.
beginning, like I just had this sense of like peace and belonging. It wasn't
Mm.
even countries I was from, but I just felt so welcome. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then over
Where were
time,
you in the States again?
so born and raised in San Diego,
Mm.
spent most of my career. San Diego is like 2 hours south of Los Angeles, and then spent most of my career right after college in San Francisco, near San Francisco in the Bay Area. And I guess real quick, my story was like I went from being on the hunt, just trying to chase the careers and titles of like Silicon Valley and fabled riches and all of that, and made it to like a point where like I had this like financial goal salary wise, and then I hit it when I became a product manager, and then just like you, it didn't really do anything for me. I was like, do I want to keep going down this path and keep climbing up this corporate ladder, or do I just get out when I have an opportunity? And yeah, I decided to do the latter, and decided to move to Rwanda. Spent like a year and a half there on and off, then Kenya, then now in South Africa. And yeah, each place just felt like home. People were super
Mm.
welcoming. There's like less anxiety. I don't know. I still can't to this day put a finger on like what it is that's so different here than over there.
Well,
But yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
Think I'll be
I,
able to
I guess,
articulate it better.
yeah. I guess from my perspective, it was um, the fact that so I I had a commute of an hour and 20 minutes when I was in London, and I would spend an hour and 20 minutes not interacting with anyone. And that's like, so that's what, 2 hours, 40 minutes every single day, just not interacting with anyone because no one interacts with each other on the tube. I think within a few minutes of being home, you're already interacting with people. You're just talking to people, and it just feels more welcoming. Um, there's also the fact that I'm a large guy, so I'm 6'2", and I'm fairly well built, and so I'm a very imposing figure, and I had to learn while I was in London. I taught myself how to make myself seem smaller so as to not be intimidating to people. And what I found was when I came back home, I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to feel like, oh, I need to be less intimidating. I could just be who I am. And I guess that's the bit that made me feel most at home. Like I said, Ghana's not my original birthplace. Rwanda's not my original birthplace. But in both cases, I just feel like I belong here. And there's no people. In fact, I find that people look at me in a kind of more curious way now. Seeing this giant guy walking down the street. Like I've lived in rural communities, and it's just people coming up to me saying hi, really fascinated by me and my story, and it just makes me feel once again like I belong, rather than I'm I'm having to be something that I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think there's something about Nigeria. There's a saying or like a nickname, African giants. I think is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, there was a Noah and Burner Boy had this conversation once on the Daily Show, and Trevor Noah was like, Nigerians, you're the only people here in Africa where when you ask someone, how are you? Everyone else is kind of like, I'm surviving. I'm trying to get by. And Burner Boy was like, why are you lying? You're doing good. You're having fun. Nigerians may be known for scamming, but one thing we are also known for is just being truthful about how we are. we don't
Exactly.
we don't hide, and I
Yeah.
find that it's appreciated here. Whereas sometimes I felt when I was in London or the UK in general, that it was kind of, you know, there was a tension there when you would try and be as outward and as you know, and effervescent as I wanted to be.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think it's a breeding ground for creativity and just being yourself, which I think transitions well into talking about your transition.
Mm.
So you had the experience, you had the awakening moment. Talk about maybe some of the ups and downs and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I think the fortunate part was the meeting with my friend who was working in Ghana, because so we did this crazy thing in university where we would fly to America and sell educational kids books door to door. So that gave me a really strong foundation in sales. Um, and so she was working for a consultancy firm called Witten and Roy, and they do sales and leadership development here on the African continent, as well as they're based in UK and America, and they do stuff there as well, and they do stuff in Asia and South America as well. So they've got a global reach. And I guess when I met her, um, because I had the solid sales foundation, one of the guys at Witten and Roy also did the crazy book selling thing. It meant that they knew the foundation that I had in sales and were comfortable bringing me to join in. So I had one interview with them, and they were like, "Yep, come on, come on in." And the difficult part was, at that time they were breaking into Africa, and they didn't have as many projects as they do now. So I was actually waiting for 6 months before I got my first project. So that was the most difficult part of it, was the kind of, I had made the decision, and then now I was kind of waiting, and when you're waiting, sometimes your mind starts creating scenarios. It's like, oh, is this really what you want to do? You're waiting so long. Is it actually going to be there when you get there? And I had a project that was due to be in Kenya, um, but then a project in Ghana came up, and I was like, yeah, okay, just jumped on it. Um, and so I think the biggest concern was always, firstly, is this real? Because you're kind of like, you have that doubt in the back of your mind of like, what if we go back and then nothing that I've been told has been set up? And I think that's kind of the Western mentality uh, as of how they view Africa as a whole. Feeling that there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of things that happen. So I came in with that kind of Western mentality. And the second part was also, I also felt like, because I had gone to school in the UK and graduated in the UK, and I had all this sales experience, I had this kind of savior mentality. And a lot of Europeans, Americans, and people who come to Africa generally tend to come with that savior mentality. And it took a young girl from a village in northern Ghana who basically said that my methodology was not going to work. And I was like, well, let's try it. She was like, no, 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 it won't work because this is how we work. And told me about the cultural nuances that I had not taken into account. And I remember that day thinking to myself, oh, I'm one of them. I'm that kind of guy who comes back and is like, because I've got this Western education, that I am somehow superior in my abilities, and
Mhm.
people should listen to me. And it was a tough day recognizing that, because it was kind of like, oh, actually, you can't just come here and think you know best. You have to come here and integrate and understand, and find the things in your education that will be useful, and find the things in the local context that are working, and how you can integrate the two, as opposed to, just being this person who tells others what to do. That's not leadership. True leadership
Yeah,
is understanding what the people you're working with need, and meeting them where they're at, as opposed to trying to get them to meet you where you are.
exactly. Yeah, I do have to admit, I did have a similar experience where, my goal is to work and take my skills from, San Francisco, the cutting edge of where technology comes from and where everything is happening and where all the funding is. I'm like, yeah, I was a product manager at a VC-backed startup. I've done growth. I have all the answers. I'm gonna move to Africa and I'm gonna preach.
It's that whole mentality. I'm going to create the Google of Africa, or I'm going to create the
Yeah,
Uber of Africa, or I'm going to create the
exactly.
Amazon of Africa. And it's like, well, actually, it may work in the US,
Yeah,
but you're working on completely different circumstances when
it's
you move here.
yeah, no, it's so different. And I've had my own humbling moments, and now I think it's very similar to when you're learning about anything new, which was my goal coming here was just to like get back to learning. And when you're learning a new concept or something, in the beginning you feel like you know everything. And then as you like go deeper and deeper into it, you figure out there's so many different paths and lanes and things that you can learn more about, and you realize you're only at like 1%. When in the beginning you're just like, oh, I have this whole thing figured out. So I think that was a really eye-opening moment. And you talked about the experience with that girl, and I think for me it was when there's a few eye-opening moments, but one was like, all right, I'm gonna start selling. It was all-in-one marketing tool at like a monthly subscription, and I'm just like pushing it and peddling it, and I'm like, after a while, I'm like, nobody wants a subscription service here,
No.
And then I had to transition into like a whole different model where it was like tied to actual revenue, and like you had to like show the value of like all the different things that can be done. And I think those are just things that you just have to experience, and
Yeah.
also you just need more conversations and research, which is what I want to get into. But any reactions to all of that?
Yeah. No. I think it's interesting because yeah, in my role when I was in Ghana, um, you know, I saw lots of things that didn't make sense to me in terms of what they were doing versus the behaviors of, um, you know, the people they were trying to sell to. So I took a step back and I started talking to people and really understanding kind of their buying habits. Like people would have the option to buy, maybe a month's worth of data or credit. Um, but no one really took that. It was only the Europeans who really embraced that where I was, and it was because they'd buy what they need, and when that finished, they go on to buy. So I realized fairly early on that subscription models uh, aren't necessarily going to work in the African context as well. So that was kind of the first eye-opening moment for me when it came to kind of, oh, we need to do more in terms of researching actual behaviors and mindsets in order to be able to really, you know, really progress things. And then came the understanding that, well, actually, if you look at the massive tech businesses in the US, they spend a lot of money on behavioral understanding and understanding consumer behavior. Yet, when we're trying to transfer US and European models here on the African continent, we ignore it. And it's like, why do you spend so much money in your own hometown to understand it? But when you come over here, you're like, don't worry. When it comes to investment. And it's like, that kind of opened my eyes to, you know, are people actually here to help, or are people here to dictate? And that was one of the things that I've become very passionate about, is really trying to get people on the same page in terms of, we're here to facilitate and you know, be the agents of change, but not in a way where we're telling people what to do, how to do it, and ignoring their own cultural heritage, their own ways of doing things. And that became my number one thing, was like, I'm not here to tell, I'm here to be a support. Um, and yeah, I think that has been the biggest change for me since being back. And yeah, it's frustrating because mindset and behavior aren't necessarily things that are high on people's lists. But over the last kind of 4 or 5 years, my focus has been it may not be high on people's list, but let's make people aware of this. And I'm now seeing the subtle changes, and you see things happening around the world, with things like USAID, and the response has been so very encouraging because I'm hearing people here on the continent no longer just going, "Oh, we need aid." They're going, "No, no, no, we need to be self-determined," and that excites me a
Yeah,
lot, a lot.
I know. Yeah, I think that's a good transition into, I guess, the state of things right now within the ecosystem. You're the lead on anything research related within Rafiki Labs. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear more about how, excuse me, you conduct some of this research, or how you lead the efforts on the research, and what interesting insights you've gotten maybe over the past couple of years from our approach.
Yeah, I think so. Research has changed a lot with the invention of things like AI and some of the tools that you have online compared to when uh, for instance, when I did my dissertation at university. I remember I got about 15 boxes worth of data on paper shipped to my house when I was doing my dissertation. I had to go through everything, and it took. And this is why I think back in the day, you were given like 6 or 7 months from the moment you choose your topic to the submission date of your research. So I think the tools that we have now make life a lot easier in terms of being able to get data. But I think, and being able to extract data. But I think one of the things that I'm very, very big on is that AI and tools need to be used as a support rather than a replacement, right? So it's making certain parts of your job easier. So when it comes to research, I utilize AI in terms of being able to extract data. I utilize it in terms of being able to create frameworks, but I don't utilize it in terms of the writing. Because I think AI still isn't at that point where it can really read between the lines. It's very matter of fact. So I use it. It's definitely sped up the process of research, but I still think that you need to have that element of being engaged with the research as opposed to, outsourcing that to, the AI or anything like that. So I guess in terms of my process, I'm someone who develops frameworks. So I look at existing frameworks and I try and find, okay, what is missing for the African context? And I'll give you an example. I'm about to release a paper that I did on investigating. So we were looking at systemic change, and I was looking at the 4 frameworks that I've been requested to use by clients when doing research. So in the last 4 years, I've had different clients say, I want to use the water systems of change model framework as a way of looking at systemic challenges in the ecosystem, or I want to use the iceberg method in terms of looking at systemic challenges. And so I did a critique on that, and one of the things you recognize is that these are Western models being implanted on the African context, and they generally tend to not really look at the nuances. So the cultural nuances, the fact that here on the African continent, we have a lot of informal systems, and those informal systems are actually fundamental and actually something that we should be celebrating rather than looking at as an inconvenience. Because if you actually look at informal systems, they're born out of necessity. So they don't have a formal system. So they create something, and that kind of innovation, I was like, oh, there's a lot of innovation going on the ground that isn't appreciated. So what I tend to do is look at situations like that and go, okay, how can we apply that to the African context? How can we build that to really help the people on the ground, as opposed to serving the whims of the donors or funders that are engaging me to do certain researches. And so I've developed frameworks, and then I use those frameworks as kind of the starting point when it comes to my research, and finding out, finding the specific data, um, and comparing the data and comparing it from a perspective which always includes understanding behaviors and understanding how people think. So, I think I'm answering your question, but but in terms of the research,
Yeah,
I am very much someone who is, you need to be context specific and you need to be innovative in the way you look at things, because it's not a case of it's never a case of one size fits all.
yeah.
Like,
No, it's
so
yeah,
it
it's
needs to
fascinating.
be specific, and there are tools that you can use to help, but once again, it's like I said, it has to be a help in terms of trying to speed things up and be more efficient, as opposed to a replacement. And
Exactly.
I'm of the belief that for Africa to succeed, we need to realize that we can do things in a more efficient way without losing who we are.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think all of it stems from, number one, having these conversations, with people who are on the ground,
Mm,
and also being on the ground, and
mm,
interacting with different stakeholders and really understanding what's happening. Because a lot of the times it's people who are not on the continent who are maybe misinformed or are spreading information that might be dated or inaccurate. I think that's where the issue comes in. And I'm a strong believer in first party data. I think we've collaborated on maybe almost a couple hundred interviews we've conducted,
yeah.
with stakeholders and, policymakers, donors, VCs, entrepreneurs, ranging from, one person SMEs to enterprises. And I think over time, we're both kind of like framework people. I'll quickly go through the bridge framework, which your job is, figuring out like what direction we need to go, in terms of the research. And what I try to do is kind of like
Be
herd
the
the
bridge
cats.
between.
Yeah, exactly. Build a bridge, and with the bridge framework, we have this on our website, rafikilabs.africa, if you guys want to dive deeper. But I think there's also a system required to rapidly collect this information and also leverage AI. So with Bridge, it's an acronym for Blueprint, which is the planning process that you're heavily involved in, and figuring out like what the goal of the research is. Then you need to like recruit, find the right voices, and leverage AI for finding these different individuals, reaching out to them. It's a game of numbers. You have to like reach out to as many people as you can, and see who kind of responds back. And then the I is for interact. Interviewing these individuals with a bit of cultural fluency, and also leveraging tech to make sure that you're gathering the transcripts and all the information, because the next step is distilling, D for
Mm,
distill, which is analyzing all these different findings, using advanced analyses and also Africa specific lenses, which I want to transition into with your Vibe framework in a second. Um, and then you have G for generate, taking all this information, all of these insights, and then turning it into something that's usable, whether it's
mm.
a research report, whether it's maybe uh,
Podcast.
podcasts, other types of content,
Mm,
or even spinning it up into actual tools and solutions, which ties to E for execute, where
mm,
we do the rapid iteration and validating these different ideas and approaches. And think the next episode, right now we're kind of focused on the research side, but maybe on the next episode we'll talk to the engineering team and talk more
Yeah.
about the development and analyses and all that. But yeah, that's the bridge framework. And I do want to, yeah, a little bit of time left. I do want to talk about your vibe framework.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of critical with the last project we did, if you want to dive deeper into that.
Yeah. So the vibe framework actually stemmed from a conflict resolution framework that I had developed. So I had this framework called FAR, which was facts plus analysis equals reality. So how we view what happens, or no, so what happens, how we view it is equal to the reality on the ground. And this is how you can have two people having the same thing happening, but feel that, you know, experience it, the reality of it in a different way. So from that perspective, I was like, okay. And I developed the vibe framework for the analysis element of it. So really understanding. So vibe stands for viewpoints. So with viewpoints, you're looking at, do people look at things from a place of responsibility, or do they look at it from a place of expectation, um, you know, or blame sometimes. So it's like, are you looking at, are you coming from internally or are you coming from externally? So when things happen to you, do you look at how you can change or do you look at how the world can change? Then you've got the different ideologies that are floating about this world. So things like capitalism, socialism, faith and religion, and now you've got the isms that have come into the ideology. So racism, sexism, you know, homophobia, all of those things. When an ideology is actually an extreme kind of way of looking at things. So you kind of have that viewpoint and don't allow other things to come into it. And then that's mixed in with the beliefs. So I look at several key areas in terms of you know, money, time, relationships, yeah, in terms of what are your beliefs around those, because those are various different things that really affect how the you know, we view the world. And then the final part is expectations. So that element is all unconscious things, and we try and bring the unconscious things that people do into the conscious. And the way you do that is you turn it into a conscious vibe, which is you're looking at, okay, what are the actual values and your vision that you want to embody? You know, what incentivizes you? You know, because incentives are different for everyone. You know, you can't always incentivize everyone the same way. So you really understanding incentives really helps you understand how you can help people act. And then you've got the conscious behaviors, which are, okay, what are the conscious behaviors that match my values and my vision? And what are the conscious behaviors that will incentivize me? And then the final part is engaged expectations. So rather than having expectations that are basically, oh, I'm expecting this to happen, from a conscious state, what you do is you go, okay, I've done this in terms of my vision, my values, the incentives and behaviors. What do I hope will happen? And how can I monitor it to see if it's working how I thought it was going to, or if there's things that I need to adapt in the earlier elements of it. So the vibe framework is really bringing unconscious ways of being into the conscious thought so that you can act in a conscious way. I think it's also able to bring together so many different viewpoints in order to combine it. So I've got a personal vibe and you've got the communal vibe, which is, okay, let's take the personal vibes and let's combine them into one communal vibe, which helps us work together in harmony and in sync. So when analyzing research, that's what I'm doing. I'm taking the unconscious elements that, you know, we may be aware of but don't really focus on, and bringing it into that conscious in order to come together in order to move forward. And I think that's an important part of
Amazing.
the research that we do, and it's very
Nice.
much a bottom-up approach as opposed to a top-down approach.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, we don't want to give them too much. You gotta you gotta book a strategy
Come find
session.
me if you want to know
Yeah,
more.
exactly. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on our website, rafikilabs.africa. Oggy, it's been a pleasure. And one thing I'll leave them with is you don't succeed in Africa by copying what worked elsewhere. You have to build your own bridge. And if you need help building